Welcome to the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series, where President and CEO Founder Paul Stukel discusses middle market issues with business leaders from across the nation. Today, in part one of a two-part series, Paul talks with Ken Esch, private company services partner at PwC, about the results of PwC's fourth quarter Trendsetter Barometer report on the state of the U.S. private companies.
So, we've got the fourth quarter report out. Optimism seems to be in the air. Why do you think it's up? The way I look at it is I look at the various world around me, and the growth numbers seem to be, better. I don't think they're blowing anybody's doors off, but some of the structural issues still seem to remain. Why do you think optimism is so up?
Well, I think the main reason that optimism is up is that we've just had a continued period of slow to moderate type of growth, which I think is just building optimism, among the PwC survey participants. And one of the things that I look at closely is the level of pessimism, among them. And that is down to the mid-single digits, which just, is another measure of their comfort level that the worst, is behind them. So I think by getting some of the challenges out of the way and moving from what I'll call survival mode to really establishing a growth agenda has given companies a little bit more of an optimistic view.
One of the things that struck me about the results was the difference between the U.S. and optimism and the world optimism. I mean, obviously the U.S. optimism is pretty good, very good. I was surprised at how good the optimism is with respect to the world economy. I know your conversation or your interviews for this were prior to the emerging markets sort of currency meltdown. Do you think that's changed anything, the turbulence in emerging markets, or are people taking that as a sort of a blip in the road and taking a longer-term view?
It is hard to tell that we, haven't spoken with the survey participants, since this news has broken. But I can tell you, anecdotally from our clients, that there still is a level of uncertainty in these in foreign jurisdictions and emerging markets in particular. But they are looking at it more of a shorter-term phenomenon, and that they would not really change, their long-term growth plans for the international markets and the emerging markets. And one of the things that I think, underlies that position is that they're looking at these megatrends, and that they know, over a long period of time, the balance of this economic power, is likely to shift east and south. And if you really want to be part of that, economic expansion, you need to be there. And, you need to establish yourself, as those market conditions improve. So while they may be considering the shorter-term aspects, they know that the longer-term trends are pointing that direction, and that they're making their investments, in those foreign jurisdictions.
Private companies clearly are much more optimistic about life than, well, maybe not life, but about business than their public counterparts. Why is that? I mean, in your dealings with these folks, and you made the point, I think, in the report that they're much more optimistic than public companies.
Well, I think part of it is because they don't have to manage to a quarter. That they can take a much longer view of their business, and they feel that in the long term that the opportunities are there, and that they will grow. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to grow this quarter, but over the span of this year and years, in the future, they're optimistic that the company's going to grow. I think that is definitely part of it. The other is that many of the owners, of these businesses really have a can-do attitude, entrepreneurial spirit, and they're going to meet the challenges head on, and they firmly believe that they'll overcome them. I think that it really kind of jumps out in our report, about the expectation of growth. It's well above what you see on the GDP readings. Substantial, portion of them, 35% or so, believe that the company is going to grow double digits over the next year. And that's really kind of a fantastic story about where these companies are going.
The report mentions M&A activity, as most do. It seems to be fairly optimistic that the corporate M&A activity is going to pick up. I think it was 1 in 5 companies were looking to grow through acquisition. This is a recurring siren song, and I always have to ask everyone about this. I mean, do you think this time that's going to come to fruition? Because there's been a lot of false starts, but there seems to be a sort of a growing drumbeat that the M&A market is going to arrive in a pretty big way. What do you think?
Well, I think at our client base at PwC, we see a lot of companies acquiring other businesses, and that's a significant portion of their growth strategy. So we are seeing that M&A activity increase among our clients. I would expect that that's going to continue, really for a few significant reasons. Maybe the first being that companies are getting more and more comfortable with the target's financials and projections about their growth. You don't have the same risk in the economy that we had 3, 4, 5 years ago. So they're getting more comfortable with the financial projections for the target company. I think that we're also seeing improvement in the credit markets, meaning that more companies are accessing capital to buy other businesses. We're still in a position where banks aren't going to finance a bad deal, but there is a lot of competition for a good deal, among the banks. So I think that credit availability factors into it as well. And I think maybe the third reason out there is that sellers, have moderated their expectations, on what they're going to get for a business, and there's a little bit more certainty around the tax consequences, of a sale. So they're maybe a little bit more willing to sell than they were a couple years ago.
Listen tomorrow for part 2 of our discussion with Ken, where he will discuss the regulatory pressures facing private companies, as well as the ongoing skills gap challenge and what companies are doing about it. For President and CEO's Focus on the Middle Market podcast series, thanks for listening.